Hey, security pros, welcome back to my masterclass on using AI agents in cybersecurity. Today, we are finally going to build an AI agent to interact with our cybersecurity tool. We've laid a lot of groundwork, we've done a lot of foundation work, but today we're going to create our agent. I'm really excited about this one, and I hope you enjoy the lesson. Okay, so you might remember from last lab that we used Postman to interact with the Indexer and Manager APIs in our Wazuh setup. But now that we know how to do that, we are going to go straight from n8n and we're going to train our agent how to interact with these directly, like this. So what is an AI agent in n8n? So generally n8n has the following workflow. We have some sort of trigger that starts the workflow. Generally, if you're using AI, it's going to be some type of chat trigger. So we're going to use chat. And then that is going to trigger to an AI agent. And an AI agent has three types of components. The first is the LLM. So we're going to connect it to something. In our case, we're going to use Gemini to start out. Why use Gemini? When there's others that are probably better. Well, Gemini is free to start out. You don't actually have to go put your card in for anything. You can just go create an API key and get started. So while we're testing, it's a perfect use case. When we want to operationalize, we might want to think about upping it to maybe a little more powerful model, something like GPT-4o or GPT-5, something like that, Claude. The next element here is going to be memory. And so what this memory is referring to is kind of like the process memory for the agent. In our case, where is it going to store the chat so that it can reference them for future responses? And in our case, we're just going to use simple memory here. Simple. So what does that mean? It's just stored in RAM. Nothing too crazy, and that's just so it can remember the last few chats that you sent it. And then over here, we've got our tools. Now here, we can plug all sorts of tools into our AI agent. But for security purposes, a lot of them aren't really built out already. So we've got to build them ourselves. And what these usually look like are going to be HTTP requests. So HTTP requests. Pretty much every security tool we have has some sort of API interface where we can send HTTP requests to that API interface and get data back. In our case, we're going to be building the ones that we use from Postman straight into these HTTP requests, and then the agent is going to be able to use them to get the data it needs autonomously. So that being said, here's our architecture. Let's get hands on keyboard. Okay, now we're in our Ubuntu test machine, and let's go ahead and open up Postman and Firefox, if it's not already opened for you. And now we're going to go to HTTP. Remember, for this one, we're not using HTTPS. And we're going to go to localhost 5678, port 5678. And that should be n8n for us. Okay, now hopefully you remember your email and password. And hopefully, Atlantium AI.io. Now let's see if I can remember my password. Nope. There we go. Okay. Now here's a quick overview of n8n. Here we can create some workflows or add a credential. It does have some templates. Variables I don't think is available on the community edition. But really what we're going to do, we're just going to create this workflow. Okay, so you can see this is in our personal folder. We're calling it My Workflow. Let's go ahead and call this first Wazuh agent. So what's going on here? So right now we're in the editor. This is where we're actually going to create our workflows. Executions is once we actually build the workflow and we run it, the executions are all recorded right here so you can see what happened. And evaluations, I don't really use that much, so I'm not too worried about that one. But really what we're going to do, let's just go ahead and add the first step. And then we're going to add on chat message. So this is a really nifty little feature built into n8n where it just does the chat for you. Now, if you're doing this in a production environment, you're probably going to want to integrate this with something like Microsoft Teams or maybe Slack. And that's a little bit more involved where the message will actually trigger the workflow. But for testing purposes, having this chat trigger is just fine. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click plus and we're going to add our AI agent. Okay, and just some things to go over here. Source from prompt is a user message and it's connected chat trigger node. That's the one that we just built. The prompt user message is JSON.chat input. That's totally fine. We are going to fiddle with some of these properties in a little bit, but let's go ahead and get the structure set up. So you can just click out of here. Okay, so we've got chat model, memory, and tool. Let's go ahead and add our chat model. We're going to go ahead and add Gemini. And now we need to create a credential. So let's go ahead and create new credential. And we need to build an API key. So what you need to do is navigate over to aistudio.google.com/app/API-keys. Or you can just Google Gemini API key and you can probably find this. And we're going to go and create an API key. We're going to call this Wazuh demo key. We need to create a project. Wazuh demo. Let's see if it'll create the key for us. Okay, then we're going to click on the key, and there it is right there. We're going to copy it. Let's go back to n8n and just paste it right there. Save. Okay, and you should have this green box that says connection tested successfully. If you don't see that, go ahead and try to regenerate the key, maybe copy and paste it back in there, and it should work. Okay, that's all we need to do for now. Memory is pretty easy. Click this little plus, and we're just going to do simple memory for now. And the tool. Here is where we're going to type in HTTP, and we're going to do the HTTP request tool. And we're going to configure this in a little bit. Now, with Gemini specifically, it has a hard time if you have it set as the model, actually using the model to synthesize the data. It actually wants a separate tool that calls the same API in order to do some of the summarization. That's not true with all models, but with the Gemini model that we're using, it is. So we're going to add a Gemini tool as well. So go ahead and add tool, Gemini. Excellent. Great. So this is pretty much our setup. And now we're going to go through and configure each of these to make sure they work. So let's start with message a model, Google Gemini. Okay, so we need to actually choose a model. Now, I know we're kind of limited since we're just using the free API key, but I do know that Gemini 2.5 Flash works. So let's go ahead and click that. Okay, now we've got some of the prompts and some of the parameters that are going to be set from the model. So here's the beauty of n8n. We could actually tell it exactly the prompt that it needs to send to itself, really. Just like you're interacting with ChatGPT or something like that. Or we click this little button here, and now the model is going to define what the prompt is going to be. Here we have a few different options. if you have a model prompt that kind of tells the model to adapt a certain personality, we could add that as well. A user prompt is your general chat message that you're going to send to the model. Okay, and that is everything that we need to configure for this tool. Now let's go ahead and configure the HTTP request. Now here is where it gets a little bit tricky, so try to follow along with me here. For this video, we are just going to be querying our alerts from Wazuh. So let's go to Postman and we can start to see what our endpoint is going to look like. Okay, so let's copy this. We're going to paste it into n8n. Now for the URL, you think that we would be able to use just localhost since it is running on localhost, but since this is in our Docker network, we actually need to make the request to the container name. So how do we find our container name? Let's go into options. Let's open up a terminal. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do a sudo docker ps. And it's a little bit messy, but we actually need the name of the container. In our case, the indexer. So let's go ahead and we're going to copy this right here. Single node wazuh.indexer-1. Copy. And we're going to paste, oops, let's see. Paste this as HTTPS single node wazuh.indexer. Okay, so we do need to set up authentication, and we're going to use a generic credential type. Now, this is just basic auth, so username, password shouldn't be too hard to set up. And select basic auth, and we're going to need to create a new credential. Okay. Now, what is the user and password? Well, if you go back to Postman and we go into environments, our Wazuh environment, we've got two parameters here, indexer user and indexer password. So we need to copy these. We've got admin and secret password. Save. Okay, so we've got our authentication set up. And one thing we can do, let's name our credential just to keep things tidy. This is going to be our Wazuh Indexer cred. Save. Okay, now if we go back to Postman and go to our search alerts, look under body, and you can see most of the query that we're doing with our indexer is in the body. And this is very, very basic stuff. So let's just go ahead and copy this over to here. We're going to send a body. Now we could specify every body parameter, but since this is actually a pretty complicated body structure, we're just going to do raw. This is going to be, we're going to switch this to an expression, and we're just going to paste that, just so we have some place to start. Now the content type is JSON, I believe. So if we go to headers, you can see the content type is application JSON. So we're just going to copy this and paste that there. So here's one pitfall that some people fall into when they're building agents is they kind of start to think that the LLMs are smarter than they actually are. The easy button is right here where we can just say, hey, model, you define the query. But the chances that the model's actually going to define this query correctly are pretty small, unless we maybe give it in the system prompt. higher level models might be able to handle that, but for what we're doing right now, we really only need the model to specify a few specific parameters. And so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to specify exactly the parameters it needs within the body. So to do that, let's let it specify how many alerts that it wants to get. Again, this is very basic to start out with. So we're going to do double curly braces, and we're going to do a $, and it should be from AI. Oops, from AI. And I always like to look at these prompts up here to see what do we need to give it. A key, a description, a type, and a default value. So a key it can be anything. We're going to call it something like num alerts. Now, also notice this is a string, so make sure to pass it in with quotations. The description, we're going to say this is the number of alerts to retrieve from Indexer. Now the type, there's some predefined types here. If you just scroll down, we've got string, number, Boolean, JSON, or optional. And sorry, this is optional. So this is a number. And we're going to give it a default value of 10. Okay, so to start out, that's all we're going to do. That's the only thing we're going to allow the model to specify. Now, one thing we are going to need to do on this, and this isn't best practice in production, but for the lab environment, it's fine, is we are going to ignore SSL issues. Why? Well, we haven't really set up the whole certificate environment in our lab, which this isn't a lab about certificates. It's a lab on how to build AI agents. But in production, you would want to make sure you have all of this set up and don't ignore your SSL issues. Okay. Let's see, this looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and click out of this. Okay, so we've got, let's actually name this. This is HTTP request, get last alerts from Indexer. Okay, now let's jump into the AI agent configuration. Okay, we do want to specify a system message. Almost with any agent you create, you want to give it a system message. This just kind of tells the agent who it is, what its job is, and if it has any specific parameters it needs to follow. This is where you tell it in the system message. Pretty much with any agent, you're going to need this. And honestly, some of the easiest ways to do this is go on to ChatGPT or Claude or something and have it generate the system message. Now, here's where it gets a little bit artistic, because a lot of times if you're not careful, ChatGPT will give it a system message that is so specific, it doesn't actually allow the model to be intelligent. On the other hand, if you don't give it enough information, sometimes it gets lost and it doesn't know what tools it's supposed to be using, etc. So it's really a balance, and you really have to fiddle with it. So we're going to go ahead and open up ChatGPT. And let's give it a prompt. Can you generate a system prompt and a Gemini tool for summarization? Also, so one thing we need to remember too is that when we're talking colloquially, we're going to be asking it, hey, tell me about the medium alerts. But really, Wazuh has a mapping for exactly like the risk score and how they map to alerts. So let's say I need to tell the... Okay, let's see what it does for us. Okay, this looks pretty good. It did do some formatting for us, which is a little interesting. We're going to ask it to get rid of that. And you'll notice, like, this is pretty intense. It's, I mean, it's okay. I think it could be more concise. So let's ask it to be more concise and remove all formatting. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and just copy this. put it into our system message. Okay, well, let's take her out for a spin. So we're gonna just highlight this, open chat, and here's where we can chat with our model. So, hey, can you get me the last 20 alerts and summarize them for me? And this is what I love about n8n is you can actually see what's going on here. Okay, so you can see it wasn't able to retrieve the alerts. We got an error. So let's go ahead and see what's going on. The service refused the connection. Perhaps it's offline. Okay, so this is going to require a little bit of troubleshooting, which that's okay. Oh, here's the problem right here. n8n always defaults to a GET request. However, this needs to be a POST request. Okay, let's try executing this step and see what we get. Didn't like it. Okay, let's try it again. Let's try that again. Still did not like it. The service refused the connection. Perhaps it's offline. Okay, I think I found the issue. We need to specify the port, which is 9200. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, great. So it looks like it was able to get those alerts. And again, remember, we're using the free model, so it is going to take a minute to actually process, but now it's going to summarize those for us. One thing I love about n8n is it really does show you every step of the way what it's doing. So you can see in the logs, you know, it's doing to simple memory, it goes to the chat model, the request, and you can see exactly the input and the output from each step. So let's go ahead and look at this. All 20 alerts originated from a single event. A single agent. Well, that makes sense since we only have one agent. Frequent sudo and PAM activity. This is actually interesting because I've been doing a lot of sudo activity using Docker commands. So that's great that it did that. Consistent SEL Linux denials for alerts, low severity, anomalies and key system changes, critical package installations. This is great. So the Ubuntu local agent is primarily reporting routine administrative actions. The most significant alerts are medium severity package management events, indicating a core system library was recently updated or installed, while the half configured state resolved to install. This activity is a critical system change to monitor. All right, so I think for a new security analyst, this is great. The fact that it's giving you a summary instead of you having to go chase that down all by yourself. But one step further, let's see if it will actually give us remediation advice. What would you recommend I do to investigate these alerts? Okay, look at this. Verify the user demos, role, and authorization. It's giving is the execution of Docker commands via sudo expected behavior. This is great stuff. I think for a new security analyst, this is going to be gold. Instead of them having to go ask the security engineers or look it up or read endless articles, all the data is summarized right here within this. And if it even needs to go get another alert, the agent has the ability to do that. And we're going to enhance that ability a little bit more as we go on. But overall, congratulations, you've built your first cybersecurity AI agent. Now in future videos, we're gonna refine this. We're gonna give it a little bit more power. Maybe it should be able to filter on how severe the alerts are. Maybe it should run this on some cadence, maybe once a day, and give a report. And all those things we're going to be doing in future videos. But as of now, congratulations, you've now used AI agents with cybersecurity. Awesome, guys. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I will see you in the next one.